Call the meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 35 of the House of Commons Special Committee on the Canada People's Republic of China relationship. Pursuant to Standing Order 106(4), the committee is meeting today to discuss a request to hold meetings on matters revealed in the Winnipeg lab documents involving the People's Republic of China. And we have some guests with us today. We have Mr. Nakvi in place of Mr. Oliphant, Mr. Biddle for Mr. Francescatos. Pleased to see Luc Berthold here for MP Seaback, and Mr. Ellis for MP Landsman, and Mr. Villamur is substituting for MP Bergeron. And of course, today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. Please wait till I recognize you by name before speaking, and for those appearing by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you're not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English, or French, and for those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, use the raised hand function, and the clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can, and we appreciate your patience and understanding in this regard. So we are here to discuss Mr. Chong's motion, and I am sure he would wish to lead off. Mr. Chong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to introduce my motion, if I may. Benefit of members of the public and for members of the committee who may be here for the first time. Mr. Chair, I move that pursuant to its order of reference of Monday, May 16th, 2022, the committee undertake a study of the matters revealed in the Winnipeg lab documents together with the broader concerns they represent in relation to Canada's national security, as well as the obstacles encountered in obtaining these documents, provided that the committee make the study a priority over its other business, notwithstanding the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, December 4th, 2023, respecting the appearance of the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Instruct the chair and the clerk to take the necessary steps to arrange for 2 meetings of the committee each sitting week for the purposes of this study. Take into consideration the relevant evidence and documentation received by the former Special Committee on Canada-China Relations during the first and second sessions of the 43rd Parliament. Invite, and if this invitation is not accepted, summons, pursuant to Standing Order 108(1), the following witnesses to appear at dates and times to be fixed by the chair. 1. The Departmental Security Officer, Executive Director of Security, Public Health Agency of Canada. 2. The Deputy Minister of Health, Dr. Stephen Lucas. 3. The Vice President, Infectious Diseases Branch, Public Health Agency of Canada, Dr. Donald Shepard. 4. The Vice President, National Microbiology Laboratory Branch, Public Health Agency of Canada, Dr. Guillaume Poliquin. 5. The President of the Public Health Agency of Canada, Heather Jeffrey. 6. The Director of the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, David Vigneault. And 7. The Deputy Clerk of the Privy Council and National Security and Intelligence Advisor to the Prime Minister, Nathalie Drouin. Invite the following to appear on the dates to be fixed by the chair. 1. The Minister of Health, the Honourable Mark Holland. 2. The Minister of Public Safety, Democratic Institutions and Intergovernmental Affairs, the Honourable Dominic LeBlanc. And 3. Other witnesses whose names shall be provided by the parties to the clerk of the committee within 1 week of the adoption of this motion, and report its findings to the House. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to move this motion. I'm just going to speak briefly to it so we can all have a say on this motion and get it to a vote. Mr. Chair, we finally got the documents relating to the Winnipeg lab. My view is that this is the start of the matter, not the end. The collection of evidence is usually the start of a process, not the completion of it. And so really we're leaving off where we left 3 years ago when the Canada-China Committee in the previous Parliament asked for the Winnipeg lab documents. I believe strongly that the committee is the right place to examine these documents, the right place to hold the government accountable, and the right place for us to hear from witnesses and to produce a report with recommendations. Mr. Chair, this is a grave and serious matter, as CSIS highlighted in its intelligence and assessment it's submitted to the Public Health Agency of Canada, which are contained, an assessment which is contained in the documents we received. It's a grave and serious matter because a government scientist clandestinely collaborated with the government and the military of the People's Republic of China and was paid clandestinely by the government and the military of the People's Republic of China without the government of Canada knowing. And so these serious national security breaches, I believe, warrant examination by a parliamentary committee. It's now been 4 weeks since we received the documents, which is the reason, Mr. Chair, as you know, I've called this emergency meeting so that we can make a decision, I hope, in favor of holding hearings on these documents. It took us 3 years to get the documents. It's now taken us 4 weeks for us to have a discussion about whether or not a committee should look at these documents. I think we should have done that almost immediately upon receiving the documents. So the motion in front of us will allow us to examine these serious national security breaches. It will allow us to examine the flow of information and intelligence within the Government of Canada and to get answers to questions such as the following. Why wasn't this caught earlier than September 2018? Why did it take 10 months for the government to secure the lab? When the first red flag went up, according to the documents, the first red flag went up in September of 2018 when a patent was discovered to have been registered in the People's Republic of China, which is contrary to government policy and contrary to Canadian law. It then took 10 months for the lab to be secured on July 5th, 2019. In my view, an unacceptably long period of time for that to happen. We also need to examine why it took us 3 years to get the documents. The ministers indicated that it was up to public servants that made the decision on what information to release to the committee. We need to examine what is wrong with the information flow between the Government of Canada and Parliament, so that in the future, when a parliamentary committee asks for these sorts of documents, they're provided forthwith in a way that protects national security as we put in place 3 years ago and not 3 years. The motion also is to examine why the documents is also examine the flow of information within the government as it related to the most senior figures in the government, the Ministers of Health, the Minister of Public Safety, and the Prime Minister's Office, to understand if the information flow within the government is working. At the end of the day, Mr. Chair, I believe we need to hold the government accountable on this. This saga started more than 3 years ago. The government defied 4 orders of the House of Commons and its committee. It took the Speaker to court, and it disposed of these 4 orders by the dissolution of Parliament, which, as you know, dissolved the 4 orders. And we cannot allow that to go unanswered and unexamined. And finally, Mr. Chair, I'll say there was a report just today in the news that a new level 4 lab is being proposed in Canada. Surely we need to study this matter at committee about the only existing level 4 lab and its security breaches before a new level 4 lab is stood up in this country that might pose security risks. So I think, I hope that members of the committee will support the motion, and I look forward to their views on it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chong. So we'll have a speaking order, and for those on Zoom, use the raised hand function if you wish to weigh in on the matter. So we'll go back and forth on this one. We'll go next to Mr. Nakvi and then to Mr. Berthold.
Point of order. I asked for before Mr.
The chair is going to go back and forth.
Mr. Speaker, I ask
And,
for
and
the
well, no,
right to speak
I
before Mr.
recognize Mr. Naqvi.
Mr. Naqvi.
Yes. So
Point of
Mr.
order.
Naqvi can go, and then you can go. You still have plenty of time.
Mr. Speaker, it's not a question of time. It's a question of opportunity. If I want to speak to, si je veux parler sur la motion de mon collègue.
If I want to speak to my colleague's motion before the party opposite moves amendments or does whatsoever, I have the right to do so, and I clearly indicated that I wish to take the floor before Mr. Naqvi. So should you deprive me of my right to speak at this juncture, or deprive me of that right concerning the motion on the table before the government party is able to table amendments that may change the pith and substance of the motion. So once again, I'd like to reiterate this. You saw me, you heard me, even our television viewers saw that I interrupted Mr. Chong calling for the floor before you acknowledged Mr. Naqvi. So I would ask that you respect the speaking order. That's a normal way that we work in committee, i.e. that you hand me the floor before my colleague. I'm sure my colleague has highly interesting things to say. That said, I'm entitled to insist, Mr. Chairperson, that I take the floor now.
The chair has the option to, to recognize people in the order that he sees them. I think that, we'll look at Mr. Naqvi and suggest that there's probably going to be amendments. So, Mr. Berthaud, I take your point that you wish to support Mr. Chong's motion before we get into looking at amendments. So, I will give you the floor, sir.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Hardy.
Thank you very much, sir. And I really appreciate the fact that you've acknowledged how important it is to respect the speaking order. Mr. Chairperson, as I mentioned previously, I'm rising or speaking in support of the motion moved by my colleague Michael Chong about how important it is for this committee to undertake a study on the Winnipeg lab documents that were just released 4 weeks ago regarding the Winnipeg lab. As my colleague indicated, the fact that we now have those documents in our possession doesn't signal the end of this matter, but rather the start. In a previous legislature, we worked very hard to obtain these documents, documents that enable us to ask the real questions, the tough questions of those persons responsible. The upshot of this is that 2 individuals were expelled from a level 4 microbiology lab in Winnipeg. That is the highest level of security lab in Canada. And it's crucial that we be able to get to the bottom of this. All the more so since we learned in the newspapers this morning that another lab 4 may become operational in short order. So we want to avoid what happened in Winnipeg, a recurrence of this at this new security level 4 lab. So we want to shed light on everything that has transpired and that has led the government to defy 4 orders of Parliament, Mr. Chairperson, regarding the production of documents. And we have a Prime Minister who took the House of Commons to court, unprecedented in the history of Canada, and who went so far as to trigger an election to defy the order of Parliament to produce documents. Fast forward a couple of years and we now have those infamous documents in our possession. It's important, as my colleague's motion states, that we have an opportunity to review and study the nature of those documents and get a handle on why it took so long to obtain the documents, what those documents reveal, such that our national security has perhaps been jeopardised, Mr. Chairperson. So in the motion, it states that the committee should undertake a study of the matters revealed in the Winnipeg lab documents, as well as broader concerns they represent in relation to Canada's national security, as well as the obstacles that I just alluded to that were encountered in obtaining these documents. I won't rehash the entire motion, Mr. Chair, but I do want to stress that there are 2 types of witnesses that we're calling for. Those who are invited or summoned to appear should they refuse to accept the committee's invitation to appear. Now, among the witnesses that would be invited, and were they to refuse it, to be summoned, we have the Departmental Security Officer, Public Health Agency of Canada, the Deputy Minister of Health, Dr. Stephen Lucas, the Vice President, Infectious Diseases Branch, Public Health Agency of Canada, Dr. Donald Shepherd, the Vice President, National Microbiology Laboratory Branch, Public Health Agency of Canada, Dr. Guillaume Poliquin, the President of Public Health Agency of Canada, Heather Jeffrey, the Director of the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, David Vigneault, and the Deputy Clerk of the Privy Council and National Security Intelligence Advisor to the Prime Minister, Nathalie G. Drouin. Now, there's a second category. These individuals that are invited to appear at dates set by the Chair. One, the Minister of Health, the Honourable Mark Holland, I'll speak to that in a moment. The Minister of Public Safety, Democratic Institutions and Intergovernmental Affairs, the Honourable Dominique Leblanc, and other witnesses whose names shall be provided by the parties to the clerk on the basis of our discussions in relation to this matter. Of course, the committee will eventually report its findings to the House. Now, let's give our television viewers a bit of a backdrop to this situation. When the red flag was raised in September 2008, when there was a patent filed in China by one of these researchers, Dr. Chu, it took 10 months to secure the Winnipeg lab, despite our knowledge of this. From September 2008 to November, those two researchers remained at the laboratory, and we want to...
We are here to actually discuss the motion
yeah, exactly.
and to discuss the terms on which the study is to proceed. Yeah. This is not necessarily... we're a little bit in advance of the process to get into the evidence part. I think what we're really here to do this morning is to discuss the mechanics of how we undertake this study. So whereas I'm sure you have a great depth of information to provide on the evidentiary side, I would draw your attention to the purpose of this meeting, which is to really get the motion in a position where we can go forward on the study. So it's the mechanics of the motion that we're here to discuss today, sir.
It's Monsieur le Président, c'est l'adoption.
Mr. Chair, we're talking about moving a motion to undertake a study which is crucial. It's absolutely important that Canadians understand why we're moving this motion. It's important for my colleagues to understand what has motivated this motion. And as I said, I'll be quite concise and quick. I just have a couple of minutes left, Mr. Chairperson. It took 10 months to secure the Winnipeg lab. And Mr. Chairperson, we need to understand when the Prime Minister was informed of the situation at the Winnipeg lab. And, of course, I referred to the Minister of Health earlier. We want to know when the Minister of Health was informed of the situation at the Winnipeg lab to ensure that there's no recurrence of this, as I mentioned previously. There are important questions we wish to ask of the Public Health Agency of Canada and the Health Department. There's information that has been revealed that may have impinged on our national security. And Mr. Holland, the Health Minister, confirmed that he wasn't responsible for this unhelpful redaction of the Winnipeg documents. And that is why we're inviting the officials from the Public Health Agency of Canada to appear to explain why they decided to redact these documents and to prevent Canadians from having access to the documents. Mr. Holland said no one at PHAC will be held responsible, and that nothing was transferred from the Winnipeg lab to the Yuan Institute in China. We want clarification regarding those statements. So, Mr. Chairperson, as I previously stated, it's crucial that we have these documents, as we now do, after all the previous attempts in the previous legislature, and the onus is now on the current legislature to get to the bottom of these issues by going over these documents with a fine-tooth comb, and it's important that we have an opportunity as community members to shed light on what occurred at the Winnipeg lab. Thank you.
And again, to those who may wish to speak, we're here to talk about the mechanics of what we're to do. The evidence, I'm sure, will be fascinating, and I will be as interested as you to find out exactly what happened and why. So now we will recognize Mr. Naqvi. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and good morning, colleagues. Pleasure to join you here this morning in Ottawa. And I want to start by saying, Chair, that this is a very important issue, and that is why the government has been quite diligent in making sure that there is utmost transparency when it comes to these documents, so Canadians can understand what exactly happened at the National Microbiology Lab. I find it quite unfortunate that it was the official opposition that has dragged its feet in terms of participating in a process that would have allowed for the disclosure of these important documents, first at the NSI COP by withdrawing their own members and not engaging in a process that pre-exists to deal precisely for such issues by members of Parliament from all political parties and the Senate. But given the seriousness of this issue, the government took another step, which is to create the ad hoc committee that allowed for members from all political parties to work together and be able to then disclose those documents in a manner that maintains important aspects of national security, but also provides for the transparency that is important. Chair, foreign interference is an attack on democracy and on each and every member of this House and of this committee, and that's why it's important that we deal with this issue in all seriousness. This cannot turn into a political show. This cannot turn into a process where members are trying to just score political points. This is about foreign interference. This is about national security, and all of us have an important and a serious obligation to treat all these matters very seriously. I can, Speaker, tell you from my experience just last week in the HESA committee, the Health Committee, where theatrics were at play from the opposition, where the opposition, official opposition members accused the Minister of Health of treason and engaged in a name calling, which was highly unnecessary and undermined, again, the seriousness of this process. So therefore, Speaker, I would like to move an amendment to this motion. It does really two things. One, it scopes the duration of the study to 2 meetings while requesting all the requested witnesses that has been outlined in Mr. Chong's motion. All witnesses named in the motion, we feel, could fit easily in 2 regular meetings. And if at the end of the day, if the committee determines that that we need more meetings are needed, as usual, we can schedule more meetings at that time or add more witnesses. So that's the first aim of the amendments that I will be proposing shortly. And the second is that we're proposing to remove the summons aspect that's been outlined in this motion, because as typical, some process is to invite witnesses as a first step, and if a summon, if that witness refuse to appear, then a summon can be issued. There is no need to have that in place in the motion, and we expect that witnesses will appear willingly, given the seriousness of this issue. So, Chair, with this in mind, I would like to move the following amendment. They're not too extensive, so should be easy to follow for all members. Number 1, to insert after the words, to insert words 2 meetings after the words that the committee undertake are. Number 2, to delete clause B. Number 3, to remove the words, and I quote, "and if this invitation is not accepted, summons pursuant to Standing Order 108 sub 1." end quote, from Clause D. And lastly, to remove Clause E3. These are the four simple changes that we are proposing in this a motion. If chair likes and if members like, I can read the entire motion as it will read with the amendments, or I can repeat myself again. I do also have copies in English and French if you like me to provide them to you, which may make things a bit easier.
All right. If I could, Mr. Naqvi, we'll need to process these one at a time, but I'm going to suspend for a moment so that copies in both official languages can be distributed and have an opportunity for everybody to read and get their head around what's being proposed. So I'll suspend for, let's say, 5 minutes. Call the meeting back to order. I'm going to go back to Mr. Naqvi, who I believe had one more thing to add that he did not include in his comments. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I'm my sincere apologies to all the members, because what I forgot to mention that the amendments that we have sent and you have in front of you also removes Clause A. That's it. Thank you. So there are 5 changes.
So again, this really focuses on the mechanics of actually acting on the motion, and I think it's probably best that we handle these one at a time. Ms. Lalonde?
Monsieur le Président.
Well, Mr. Chairperson, listen, I don't want to get into a debate on this specific topic, but I firmly believe that given that these amendments were presented in an order that was easy to follow, I think that in order to save time, perhaps we could look at them all together, Mr. Chairperson, rather than one at a time. And of course, I have a lot of respect for you, Mr. Chair, so I don't want to take your prerogative, but nevertheless.
Mr. Villamar?
Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. With all, I respect my colleague, but I'd like to go through these amendments separately. I'm a replacement member on this committee, so I'd like to have an opportunity to look at things in detail.
Very good. So that's, if that's the will of the committee, then that's the way we will proceed. Now, I do have a speaking order then on the amendments. We'll start with the first one, Mr. Chong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to be clear, we're on so you've broken it into 4 amendments, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So we're on the amendment that would strike Clause A, is that correct?
I believe it's to include 2 meetings.
2 meetings, okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So that,
So I'll
and
speak
recognizing that normally we set a number of meetings.
Yep. So I'll speak to that amendment. I do not support the amendment. 2 meetings is not sufficient to examine this matter. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Right, Mr. Villamar?
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Now, in the same vein as my colleague, I think that we should state at least 2 meetings. 2 meetings, given the long list of witnesses and those witnesses that might be added later, would be insufficient. So I think we should clarify that it should be at least 2 amendments, and I'm moving a sub-amendment here, which I'll send through in a moment.
I think that the sub-amendment is fairly clear, just to include the words at least 2. I would look to Mr. Naqvi to see if he would recognize this as a friendly amendment. If so, then we can dispense with that. Mr.
My sincere
Naqvi?
apologies. I missed Mr.
Mr. Villamar is suggesting that we add the words at least 2 meetings. So that's a sub-amendment to your amendment.
Can you just give us suspend for 1 minute? Give me
Sure.
a moment
Yep.
to just thank you.
Very good. Okay. So then we're on to the main amendment then that says at least 2 meetings. You look pensive, Mr. Chong. Do you wish to weigh in?
We'll support the sub-amendment.
Okay. The sub-amendment, now we're on to the amendment so that it says at least 2 meetings. Are you good with that?
Yes.
Okay. Do we need a vote on that, or are we all good with the wording as
We're all
presented?
good.
Do we need to call the roll?
No.
I see thumbs up. We're good. Okay, very good. Let's move on to the next amendment then. Mr. Nakavi, would you like to repeat that for us, please?
Thank you. The next amendment was to remove Clause A and Clause B.
All right. So removing Clause A and Clause B. We'll take them both. Mr. Chong.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't support this amendment. Removing Clause A would have the effect of not making these hearings a priority. I believe these hearings should be a priority. We've waited 3 long years to get these documents and to continue and to examine this matter. And so I think it should be a priority. And secondly, I don't support the amendment because I believe we should be meeting twice a week. House of Commons administration has indicated that there are the technical resources and human resources available to meet twice a week. And that will allow us to examine this matter sufficiently before we adjourn at the end of June. If we only meet once a week, we're not going to have enough time to examine this matter. And so I would like us to meet twice a week, which is what the motion proposes, as other parliamentary committees do. And I would like us to keep these hearings a priority of this committee. So I don't support the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chong, just for clarity, our current meeting is 3 hours long on Monday evening. Are you proposing 2 3-hour meetings per week?
No, Mr. Chair, I'm proposing 2 2-hour meetings a week, and I think that would be better for members' schedule as well. So we'd meet from 6:30 to 8:30 on Monday evening, and then again from 6:30 to 8:30 on Wednesday evening, allowing us on Monday evening to get home before at a more reasonable hour. So that's what the motion is proposing. And not so great detail, gives you, Chair, flexibility to determine the exact time of the meetings, but that's what I would propose, Mr. Chair. But just to finish, I don't support the amendment because it would have the effect of not making these hearings, this study, a priority, and it would have the effect of us only having a chance to meet once a week. And as you know, the calendar over the coming weeks is full of constituency weeks.
Very good. Mr. Smith, your hand is up.
Thanks, Chair. I don't really have an issue with this being a priority. That seems fair to me. It would also make sense that we accommodate the Deputy Prime Minister and Finance to attend, and I don't know that this needs to get in the way of that. But regardless, I have no real issue with A in terms of making it a priority. I don't really see the need right now, and it may be that the need arises later, and I appreciate what Michael's saying, but based on the text in front of us, the witnesses in front of us, the idea that it's at least 2 meetings, it's kind of incomprehensible that we'd be talking about jamming 2 meetings a week at this moment. I would think we would start this study and come back to this. If the 3 hours a week is insufficient, we could revisit it after a couple of 3-hour meetings. I see no reason right now to jam all of our schedules unnecessarily.
All right. Seeing no further oh, yes, Mr. Villeneuve.
Merci, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Well, despite the fact that this study is important, look at how much time it's taken us to get to this point. And I don't want us to lose sight of the fact that we have other work to do. And I'm looking at the analysts as I speak. There's the Indo-Pacific strategy that's almost completed, that study. And the Taiwan government, 1 hour. Minister Freeland for 1 hour. This is important, of course, and I don't want to further delay these meetings, but I think that this would give the analysts time to do what they need to do, and that would be reasonable. I'd like to leave the chairperson the leeway to join the dots here, but this is important, and I was on the ad hoc committee, so I understand the import of this particular issue, but I don't think that whether it's 1 or 2 meetings will make much of a difference. we don't want to, in fact, completely set aside all the other studies, but I do want to proceed as quickly as possible. So, but that said, I would vote in favour of this amendment.
All right, are there any further interventions? We best take the roll on this one, Madam Clerk. So we're actually then voting to delete A and B, to be clear. All right. Go ahead. Yes, Mr. Chong.
Just can make a last pitch to have 2 meetings a week. We only have, practically speaking, 6 sitting weeks left for committees to meet. There's 8 or so sitting weeks left, but the reality is the last 2 weeks are not weeks where we can practically have meetings because of the need to get the estimates through and other government legislative priorities through in the last 2 sitting weeks of June. So what that practically means is that we have 6 sitting weeks in which a committee could meet. And so that leaves us, if we're only going to meet once a week, that's 6 meetings. That's not a lot of meetings to complete the Indo-Pacific strategy, to hear from Minister Freeland on as she was previously scheduled to appear, and on top of that, to hear from witnesses concerning the Winnipeg lab. So I really think that going from 1 3-hour meeting a week to 2 2-hour meetings a week would allow us to complete all of the agreed to studies in front of the committee before a summer adjournment.
Mr. Villemur?
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I think that there was a misunderstanding. Earlier, we agreed that we would go through amendments one at a time, and now we're looking at 2 concurrently. So I, as I said previously, would like to look at the Amendment A first and then Amendment B thereafter. That was what we agreed, after all.
So I think that's probably reasonable because they are 2.
So point of order, Mr. Chair, can you tell us what amendment we're on then?
We are on the amendment to remove Article A, make the study a priority of other business, et cetera, et cetera. So voting for this means that we would, as a committee, need to deliberately schedule it for when we thought we wanted it, which could be right away. So basically fulfilling the spirit of A. Or if the committee agrees that this should take priority over the other business, then that's what we would do. If, on the other hand, the committee wanted it to take its turn in terms of the other work that the committee is doing, then we would vote for the amendment. So, yes, Mr. Chong.
Yeah, so just to clarify, I do not support this amendment. I believe the study should be a priority. We've waited 3 long years to get to this point. It's time for us to expeditiously deal with this matter in committee. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that I won't call it a complicating factor, but a factor that needs to be considered is that there have been other committees meeting, including the special committee that Mr. Villemur and I believe Ms. McPherson was on. So part of the consideration is whether or not this has been examined enough so that in total the government is getting the kind of input that it requires to make wise decisions, as we say each day. So let us then look at the motion.
Mr. Chair, if I could,
oh,
sorry
yes,
to interrupt.
Ms. McPherson. Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to say on your last comment that Renee and I were on the ad hoc committee. That was not the mandate of the ad hoc committee, was not to look at improvements and recommendations for the government. So in fact, that work has not been done. So I agree with Mr. Chong that we should prioritize this work. Our work was separate, and I think we did some really excellent work together, but that is not what the mandate of that committee was.
Good. I appreciate that clarity. Thank you very much. So then, that does make it clear what we are either voting for or not. So let's look at the amendment to remove subsection A and understanding what a yes or a no means on this particular amendment. I'm sorry. Mr. Biddle? Oh, no, I think that's somebody's cursor on there because I don't. Mr. Biddle, you don't have your hand up. That's your cursor, probably. Oh, it's weird. Okay, too many screens, too many icons floating around. Shall we take the roll on this one, please, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Erskine Smith.
I don't have a strong view of this, but I mean, I'm fine with other business, so I suppose I'd vote to remove it.
Mr. Biddle.
In favor.
Madame Lalonde.
Oui.
Mr. Naqvi.
Yes.
Ms. Yip.
Yes.
Mr. Chong.
No.
Mr. Kimmich.
No.
Mr. Ellis.
No.
Monsieur Berthold.
No.
Monsieur Villemur.
No.
Miss McPherson.
No.
So it's 5 yeas, 6 nays, so that amendment is defeated. We will now go on to amendment number 2, which is to instruct the chair and the clerk to take necessary steps to arrange for 2 meetings of the committee each sitting week. Mr. Chong has clarified this to be 2-hour meetings per week. The amendment suggested is to remove this this particular part of the motion. So again, anybody speaking to that, Mr. Chong?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The reality is that there are 9 sitting weeks left. The last 2 sitting weeks are not possible, practically speaking, to have meetings. So that means there remains 8 weeks. Our track record on this committee, because of House votes, has been that 1 out of 3 meetings has been canceled. So what that really practically means is that out of the 8 sitting weeks where we potentially have a Monday evening meeting, that likely we would only have 5, maybe 6 slots for meetings if we stick to once a week on Monday evening. And that's not, in my view, sufficient time to deal with all the matters in front of the committee, including this study, if the motion is adopted. So I think going to twice a week will ensure that we will have sufficient time to complete the business of the committee. It's only 1 extra hour a week, going from 3 to 4 hours a week. It's what every other committee on the Hill does, 2 2-hour meetings a week. And so I encourage members to defeat this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Naqvi?
Thank you, Chair. I think this amendment really makes sure to build on Mr. Chong's point that this issue is a priority and that we need to deal with this issue as quickly as possible to stay with the regular schedule of this committee, which is 3-hour meetings per week. We have just all agreed that there will be at least 2 meetings to study this matter. So that's 6 hours. We're of the view that that is sufficient time to go through all the witnesses that are listed in this motion, and that will allow for the committee members ample time to appropriately review the depth and scope of this matter. Given everyone's schedule, given the resources at the House of Commons, having 4 hours of meeting per week, it's unnecessary given the fairly generous schedule that this committee has of 3 hours per week of meeting. So again, it's coming from the spirit of ensuring that this matter is dealt with as quickly as possible, that there's as much as transparency as possible. That's the stated purpose by which Mr. Chong has brought this amendment and this motion, and this amendment makes sure that we continue with the regularly scheduled time, which fits in everybody's schedule who are members of this committee, and deal with this matter over the next 2 meetings expeditiously. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Yip.
Thank you, Chair. Given that A is still in the motion to make this study a priority over its other business, I don't think we need to have B because it's already prioritizing these meetings, so we don't need to take on extra meetings. And I think that having 3 hours at a time really gives us a chance to delve into a subject in terms of its time frame, 3 hours of straight looking into the matter, whereas breaking it up into more meetings may lessen that intensity. And I just feel that A does address it. And as Mr. or Monsieur Villemere has suggested, there's still other studies. We have to finish the Indo-Pacific strategy as well as there's that Taiwan study. Thank you.
Mr. Villemere.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I'd just like to borrow from what Mr. Naqvi just said. We need to proceed rapidly, I agree, but we have to do it properly, and Mr. Chong's proposal strikes me as reasonable. There are just so many things to delve into here. I don't think that we can do right by the Canadian public in terms of their trust in our public institutions. After becoming aware of the report and its the final version of the report, I think it strikes us that there are serious misgivings and concerns here. And I don't think that we should waste our time discussing whether there should be 1 additional hour or 1 hour less, given the level of faith that's currently in our government. And I support Mr. Chong's amendment.
All right. Seeing no further hands up to speak. Yes, Ms. Lalonde.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chair, listen, I'm speaking out loud here. I'm very confused, in fact. But having sat since the very beginning of this parliamentary session on the Canada-China Committee, yes, it is true that Monday evening from 6:30 until 9:30 is not always pleasant, given our already long schedules. But I'd just like to come back to what my colleague just said. Those 3 hours are useful to the extent that we can receive several witnesses in one single meeting. I'd also like to point out that we're right in the middle of one study. In fact, we've almost finished our Indo-Pacific study. But more specifically, Mr. Chairperson, I'd like to stress that on Mondays, since I came to Parliament, there have been votes. There are at least 1, 2, sometimes up to 10 votes on a Monday. And as a member of Parliament who represents Orleans, I of course, it's a point of honour for me to participate in those votes. But that means that the 4:30 committees, the 5:30 committees are at 6:30 p.m. So we have our Monday time slot right through till we adjourn in June, and we can review this after the summer. But I'm just trying to understand what Mr. Chong is getting at here. Is it that he doesn't want to have the Monday meetings? Does he want those to be cancelled? We know that we have so many votes on Wednesdays that will make it really difficult to sit as a committee then. Whereas on Monday, for the most part, we are able to have a fulsome meeting. And as I said, there's the motion on the Indo-Pacific. And I'd like to congratulate you, Mr. Chairperson. Over the past couple of weeks, we'd heard from extraordinary wonderful witnesses, and we're really sinking our teeth into a study here, and we're almost have almost finished it. So in no way am I casting aspersions and saying that this motion is important, and it behooves us to look at us. But I don't think we should upend our committee schedule in this particular session, because we won't be able to complete any of our studies at that point.
Recognizing, and I have a speaking order now, Mr. Smith, Mr. Villamur, and Mr. Chong wishing to speak. I should also, though, mention at this point that it isn't guaranteed that we would have the House resources, notwithstanding the fact that the original motion setting up this committee gave it priority over just about everything else. It doesn't over votes and other things, of course. But you know, we're not guaranteed that we'll actually be able to have those Wednesday meetings. So again, I have Mr. Smith, Mr. Villamur, and Mr. Chong. Mr. Smith, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. So I said this earlier, and I'd be interested in people's thoughts on this, because at the end of the day, I look at the list of witnesses in this motion. That's barely, I mean, 6 hours is going to accomplish those witnesses and then some. And so if there are a long list of additional witnesses pursuant to sort of the basket clause there, then so be it. Maybe you can correct me and you can say, oh no, I'm expecting this to be 12 hours or I'm expecting this to be 18 hours. But at the end of the day, it looks to me like 2 meetings as currently scheduled gets us through that list of witnesses. As I said before, I don't really understand what the rationale is for expanding it further. And I recognize the importance, but not the urgency here, because to my understanding, in terms of Michael's initial explanation for the importance of this motion, which point taken, I mean, we're to question the reason for the delay when there was a red flag in 2018 to the administrative investigation being initiated in 2019. That's worth looking at for sure. That's important. That's not urgent, though. And two, to address the delay in documentary disclosure. I mean, I was one of the Liberals to vote in the House for disclosure, so I value transparency and I value getting to the bottom of that. But again, important, but not urgent. So again, why are we jamming our schedule House resources, and for what? I don't see it at all. 3-hour meetings, to do 2 of them, and then we can have a conversation. If we need more, we add more.
Thank you, sir. We'll go to Mr. Villamur.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Well, listen, when I listen to what my colleagues have to say, we have to decide on what's important here. And in the Canada-China Committee's, under its mission, well, it's a very broad mission. And we need to determine what the impact of foreign interference is in our diplomatic relationship with China, and that isn't included in the motion that I think should be added. And I'm sure that there will be other witnesses that will be added to this list. So I think that I don't think it would be advisable to reduce the number of meetings at this point.
Mr. Chong?
Okay, so a couple of points. First, in drafting this motion, I canvassed a number of members of the committee, and it was clear that members did not want to sit during constituency weeks. I'm happy to sit during constituency weeks. I think there's lots of House resources available during constituency weeks. And so my initial proposal was that we sit twice a week, that we sit during constituency weeks to deal with this matter, because the House calendar this spring is so full of constituency weeks. But because members weren't favorable to that, I took that into consideration in the drafting of this motion, so that we would only sit during sitting weeks as a committee. The second factor, Mr. Chair, in all this is that there are 9 witnesses we are calling to appear if this motion is adopted. 9 witnesses. 2 of them are ministers. Ministers are normally accorded a full meeting. They normally sit alone they normally appear alone as a witness. They don't appear with with the witnesses enumerated through in 1 through 7 in the motion. And so that means